So, hello and welcome to week 10 of Incarnate Faith for Lifelong Ministry. I'm Lisa Magdalena Hess, professor at United Theological Seminary, and this is sort of my arc of commentary on fitness as a communal endeavor, which is not usually how we think of it. Which is some of what I've learned in the last 5 years and some in my CrossFit journey. So this is sort of a theological and personal avocation kind of offering of reflections. There's also an invitation to listen to a Harvard Divinity School YouTube with the founder of CrossFit, Greg Glassman. Harvard Div School invited him in November of 2015 to speak on, in some sense, how we gather is sort of the overarching umbrella topic, recognizing that younger generations are gathering in distinctive and new ways. One of the communities that came up again and again as the folks who were studying millennials and looking at how they gather was CrossFit. So if you Google CrossFit as church, ? With Greg Glassman, Harvard Div School, it'll come up on the YouTube. It's about an hour and 20 minutes of a time investment. But then you can also get access to the PDF study called How We Gather. And so those are also underneath these reflections. So I want to say this is not an argument for CrossFit as much as my theological learnings from my experiences in CrossFit. Folks who get really into CrossFit, and I am one of them, can become sort of evangelistic about it. And it's like those who aren't involved in CrossFit get tired of hearing about CrossFit. So there's so many parallels to communities of faith, aren't there? But this is not an argument for CrossFit. I actually am more interested in the larger arc of the contribution of what we're seeing and how it works, why it works, and why it worked for me in particular, to really, in some sense, reintroduce me to my own body and my own body and community in a really beautiful way. I've named this in a bunch of different ways, but I have a deep history or her story of shame imposed and ingested both by my faith tradition, by how my family sort of shaped and held that faith tradition for me. So being a little girl in small town Ohio did not really give me a good introduction to my body as good, as beautiful, as strong. My parents, they're very type A, wanting to raise responsible young daughters. And so I really do honor that intention, but they created this whiteboard where we had our chores, and then, you got marked off all the chores you did. And then if you did the chores, you got little chips. So it was the chip system. And if you did all of yours, you got lots of chips. Well, this really worked for my sister because she was all about it. This did not work for me. It just imposed more and more, not good, not enough, achieving your salvation, earning your affection. I mean, it was just bad. And finally, I think my parents realized, okay, this is really not working for Lisa. So they stopped, but it didn't stop it from searing that in. So when I walked into the CrossFit gym for the first time and they had a whiteboard up there and you had to put your score up there, oh my gosh. No, thank you. So it was a really, so by the time, but I was, I was 49 when I started CrossFit. I realized, okay, I was getting older. I'd had a fair number of repetitive injury things. I was a runner and I would always run too much. So, plantar fasciitis in my foot. And so there were all kinds of repetitive running injuries. And it was always just a battle. I never could figure out a nice way of being in my body, active. I worked with a personal trainer for over 10 years. That was the best sort of commitment that I made to myself in my sort of 30s and 40s. And but a friend of mine was getting double hip replacement surgeries. And I was like, oh my heavens, I need to do something different. So I did a research for CrossFit gyms in the area. My personal trainer had gotten into CrossFit, so she had brought some of that into our training sessions. And so I showed up at the CrossFit that was close to my job, August 18th of 2018. And I saw the whiteboard and I could just feel the tears come. I was like, so I remember writing, it's like, I don't know, page and a half single space email to the affiliate owners who are dear friends now about, what I needed in order for this to be a safe space for me, that I was never going to put my name on the whiteboard. I just basically created, I was like, I love this. This is working for me. This is really what I want. Here are the things I can't do because these are, and I'm sure. And actually, Melissa and I have talked about it. She was like, I gave you 3 months. I figured you weren't going to last. And here I am, because I created a space that was safe for me, that I could continue to show up. And then it became like adult recess. It became a community that I could laugh with, and who held space for me to deal with all of my shame issues, who encouraged me. Eventually, they did a health program called Dedication Health that really had you re-examine your relationship with food. What does it mean to eat cleanly? So not a particular diet of any kind, but protein, fresh vegetables, foods from the outside of the grocery store as opposed to the processed stuff in the middle, cutting out sugar, which sounds like this huge onerous thing, but I am such a better human being without sugar. I mean, I'm just nicer, and I'm not as reactive. I'm not, so it's a thing I do for everybody around me as well as me. So it changed my relationship with food. But the biggest thing, and the reason that I think it's got a theological invitation for anybody who's in ministry of any kind, is the fundamental role of the community, of those that gather. So, of course, my work has been returned to the body. First time I did it was looking at the role of music in faith formation. Second time, actually, the first one became my second book, Learning in a Musical Key, Insight for Theology in Performative Mode. The first book was all about covenantal companionship. I was getting at this idea of covenantal companionship and how one can be intentionally formed in a very different way with a commitment to a community. Encounter, as my work moved interreligious and into no traditions at all. So a companionable way, again, with this notion of relationship as the container, which of course it was just a matter of time before CrossFit became a circle community around fitness. I've always said, if you put a circle around anything, I'll learn it. And so this is a communal container around fitness that really maximizes the use of communal wisdom, accountability, transformation, creativity, play, uses all of that communal wisdom around fitness and nutrition. So it was just a matter of time. And so I began to now see how clearly fitness is such a shame-based weapon in our culture today. I came across this great book called Gut Feeling, Healing the Shame-Fueled Relationship Between What You Eat and How You Feel. It's by Will Cole. I had some help writing the book by Gretchen Lidecker. And he's really interested in looking at the medical supported research, but also he's a functional medicine guy, which means he's really looking at how food fuels human experience, which is a little bit avant-garde to establishment medical practitioners today. But he's really looking at the medically researched relationship between what we eat and rise of depression, anxiety, and then of course so many of the chronic illnesses, whether it's diabetes, heart disease, et cetera, et cetera. So, but he's interested in more what you eat and how you feel, particularly anxiety and depression. So he developed a term called shameflammation, and he invite you to get curious about how shame is an underpinning of how we deal with food and how we deal with our bodies. There's a 21-day plan that he invites you into, not about changing anything you eat. You eat whatever you want to eat. But after you eat it, you do some like, okay, so how do I really feel? How do I really feel? Um, so, so I think shameflammation is a fabulous term. It's connecting how we feel with how much chronic inflammation, which then leads to these chronic health things. I think also fitness is a shame-based weapon because we're so attuned to comparison, whether it's via social media, whether it's just how we were schooled. Comparison is huge in the sense of deflation for so many of us. And that was a huge thing when I went into the gym. I couldn't imagine that people weren't judging me for how poorly I did work out. Now I realize everybody's so, if you get the relative intensity right, everybody's so exhausted by what they're doing, they're not paying attention to me at all. As a matter of fact, nobody cares. I was the only one that was all fixated on everybody must be judging me. Well, that's an example of how sort of culture fitness is a shame thing. Like, I'm not enough, I'm not doing it right, I'm not good enough, I'm not as good as such and such. And then, of course, the marketed diet culture. I mean, talk about big business. Keto, paleo, Mediterranean, this, that, or the other. And what I'm realizing is that, and, I can go into, more orthodoxy and less orthodoxy in my own choices. But what I'm learning is, the moderation and just enjoying the things that I do in moderation, and then going back to the normal ways of eating that make me feel really good and give me a lot of energy, and I'm not reactive, and I don't get anxious, and I don't get sad. So to watch the marketed diet things in our culture, I think, is whenever anybody talks about fitness, this is sort of how it comes up. So what I'm finding is that fitness in a communal container, whatever communal container it might be, the one that I know and the one that really worked for me is CrossFit, but there are others out there that that try to bring in communal wisdom, and I think there's real possibility of healing shame-based dynamics when you put it in a healthy community. So, but there are important things, I wouldn't recommend every CrossFit gym. I mean, there are lots of folks who are so into comparison and marketed this and shame-based motivations in CrossFit gyms too. I just happened to land in one that was really good for me, and then become affiliated with another one that balances this, in a good way for me. So there are some really important pieces about fitness as a communal container. One is looking at relative intensity. Everybody's body is different, and everybody's body of the day, which is a phrase a friend of mine, Libby Smith, uses. You can find her online. She's an organizational consultant coach. But everybody's body of the day is different. I mean, my body is different from day to day, and I go in with a sense of, okay, so do I feel like I can challenge myself today, or is today more of an active recovery day and I just want to be here to play and to be in the community? So there's a relative intensity function. It's not all out all the time. It's good to go all out and then have a couple less so. But what is the relative intensity for your body? That means there are going to be those who are doing the workout in the most challenging fashion possible. And I'm going to look and say, okay, I'm going to do about half of that. Say, okay, my weight is going to be half, or my rep scheme is going to be lessened. And there's that, and that's really good for me to identify what my body wants to do. And then it becomes fun. My body really enjoys it. Hence adult recess. It becomes playful. There's also a thing in the communal container, and this is what I resisted at the very beginning. But if you track your workouts, if you put them into an app and you see what you did on this particular day, you do that workout again in 6 months and you see if you can beat your time. You see if you can raise the weights. which means your fitness is either being maintained or perhaps getting even greater. So there's value to tracking the workouts. When I first came in, it was all about I wasn't enough. It was a whiteboard thing. It was not enough. I was going to be shamed for not doing it right. I'm going to be the last one in the group, And so it's not like that anymore. I see, when you actually commit to fitness in a communal container that tracks progress, you can see that you are maintaining your fitness. You can actually measure it and say, my fitness is maintained, or my fitness is better than it was because I did a heavier weight, or I did it faster. That's all. It's measured to you, not to anybody else. Huge difference that I didn't know until the last couple of years. So I will say, about 6 or 7 months into my first year of CrossFit, I finally then said, okay, you can put my name up on the whiteboard. I think I've grown past that. Everybody celebrated, which again was significant. They could laugh with me about it, not at me, and they could celebrate with me when I had made it that far in my own journey that it didn't hit those bad things inside of me. So also learning to scale, when you come in and you take a look at what's there, it means you're getting wiser discernments about your own body. You know your body better. You're making good choices, which means you then get greater self-confidence, increased courage. You begin to get adventurous inside and outside of any walls, whether that's home or family or faith community. I call going to CrossFit my cup of courage for the day. And it is marvelous to extend yourself further than perhaps you thought you might otherwise. So, and then at different times in the year, at least in the CrossFit rhythm, there are slated workouts. They call it the open, where everybody does the same workout and the standards are what they are. But what happens is the community really buckles down and encourages, holds the container, and pushes you in ways that you didn't think. And so I've wound up doing more in the workout than I thought, or higher snatch lift than I ever thought I could do, because literally the community was all around me. They knew that I had 30 seconds to do this lift, and they were yelling and screaming at me. And of course I was going to get that thing up off the ground. So there's something about the community encouragement and then the celebration of it afterwards. The wisdom of community. The church has known about this for centuries, so have Jewish synagogue communities and mosques. There's something about the community that gathers human wisdom. We know that. Why don't we do that with fitness? Why is fitness all about an individual body, how it looks? That's because that's what we've made. So my last sort of observation, moving into the theological realm, is how to think about fitness theologically, even as prayer. For those who in a lot of the Christian living parts of the bookstore that I usually don't spend much time in because I find a lot of the theology really difficult. But there are some who are beginning to use sacred motivation for fitness. Again, I think it's often shame-based. Your body's not good as it is. You need to honor the temple, as the temple of the Spirit, but you need to do these things out of a sense of obligation or duty. It doesn't work well it works well for others, clearly, because they sell a lot of books, but that doesn't work well for me. So theologically, the way that I would get into it is just incarnation, embodied presence in community. It is totally incarnational and Trinitarian right there. So if you want to think theologically about it in a Christian sense, what does it mean to host a greater spirit in you, spirit intimacy that we've been talking about this semester, and in the relationality of a community? Totally theological, and it doesn't need to be about your effort to salvation. It already is just as it is, whether we call it that or not. There is a certain way that discipline creates devotion in human beings. We also say intention, or what you attend is what you create in the world. Where your attention is what you create in the world. So if you just show up to a communal container, fitness, again and again, you will get more fit. So that's one of the wisdoms, just show up. Just show up. So all I need to do is sign up for the class and get my body there. And the rest of it, I just follow along with what the community is going to do. Makes it not about me and my head story and what I think about my body of the day. It means that I'm in a community that is holding a space for me to move and play. And it's wonderful. It creates a devotion to what you attend. So I have a blog, CrossFit at Midlife. CrossFit is very clearly an action or activity of devotion. I mean, I'm there 5 or 6 times a week if I can do it. The third thing, and this is again and again, if we nourish the body well, we become a human being more and more fully alive, which is sort of the, what is the glory of God? A human being more and more fully alive. Irenaeus of Lyon is known for that, but that's also in catechetical trainings. What is the chief end of humanity? To glorify God and enjoy God forever. Of course, I changed the pronouns and stuff because, that's who I am. But that's not how the catechism is written. It's Heidelberg Catechism 1 for my tradition. I don't know what it would be for other traditions. But again, it's to glorify and enjoy God forever. If you nourish a body well, you become more and more fully alive. And so one of the, if you look at in the appendix of the lecture handout, there's the pyramid, and at the very base of the pyramid is nutrition. And so it is, protein, veggies. Actually, if you look in the summary of fitness in 100 words, which is how I'm going to end my reflections. World-class fitness in 100 words, which is from the CrossFit Level 1 Training Guide, page 17, but we'll get there in a minute. Food is a big part of that. And so you can exercise and do all of the physical activity you want, but if you're eating like crap, it's not going to matter. And it's not eat so I can then, or exercise so I can then eat. Also a bad idea. What is going to nourish your body so that you feel good in it? Community as container, diversity yet commonality of rituals. One of the fun things for me has been, we call it CrossFit tourism. So when I go different places, I go to different CrossFit boxes. And it's fascinating to see, what's so familiar, what's so common about it. And then also each community has its own particular signature, or how they do what they do, or how the community that gathers, they're different. So there's a diversity, a commonality of rituals. As I said, risk-taking in class. I think being engaged in the way that I am in fitness has made me a stronger professor. It's made me a stronger woman alongside my husband's call. I always say I'm not a very good preacher's wife because I tend to be a little bit too bluntly spoken, but it's made me less reactive in that space, more empathetic in that space. And so there's an opportunity both to be more courageous and more empathetic, because I'm in a community that holds me in something I love several times a week. I like to talk about CrossFit also, or this, fitness approach, as childlike learning, or in the Zen tradition, you would call it beginner's mind, which is very different than childish. I think I came in very childish. I would throw a temper tantrum anytime I felt bad or shamed or anything. And now I'm just more curious about the behavior, or the skills that we get to learn. We even did one where it was because there's this new movement called pullovers, which I can't imagine ever doing yet. Maybe I could say, or not. But we spent a day, or part of the time playing about going upside down with the rings, or going upside down and then swirling upside down. I mean, it was exactly what recess was when I was growing up as a kid. I loved it. And then finally, I think one of the biggest contributions when you think about fitness as a communal endeavor as opposed to an individual one, is how much better you get at discernment of being in your own body, even as you allow the community to invite you into challenges that you never would have chosen otherwise. So if those aren't all applicable to being a person of what I would call the good news, whether you call that Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu, I don't know what is. I mean, this is such a beautiful testimony to the power of community to hold wisdom for future generations. So I invite you to watch as much as you'd like of the Greg Glassman conversation at Harvard Divinity School. The PDF link is in the course shell, but if you go on to Google and put "How We Gather" in quotation marks, as well as Harvard Div School, it'll come up. It's on one of the blogs of one of the authors. He's got it as a free PDF. And what they're interested in, which I wasn't going to spend too much time on, but they had 6 themes that they were really looking at, and community, personal transformation, social transformation, purpose finding, creativity, and accountability. This is the invitation that humans that gather regularly for what I would call aliveness and aliveness in faith. Those are the themes that showed up again and again and again in communities that were really vibrant. So, as you think about traditions of faith, what could we learn? What could it look like? So in my own context, at my husband's church, they have I think it's twice a week, a fitness morning because it's an older aging population. But we know in the corner of the fellowship hall, there's an entire thing of colorful dumbbells, and they have an instructor come in, and there's a chair, and they do different strength training things for older adults, strong in faith, stronger in bodies. And they love it. I mean, it's, Brian always makes sure you're there to go say hello to the exercise class. And it's a vibrant part of gathering as church for this community. There are different youth weavings. There's a whole movement to get CrossFit into high schools. For their physical education programs. There are programs like Girls on the Run or Girl Trek. Girl Trek is the African-American one that's more for Black women getting out and walking in the community. Girls on the Run is the local one that I think Fairmont, my husband's church, will be involved in. But for each thing that you think, like, what are the theological underpinnings that connect to scripture, connect to theological tradition? It's not this separate thing. That there's something about bringing the resources of community together to really look at re-inhabiting our bodies, or more fully inhabiting our bodies, and how we become stronger communities when we do that together. So again, you've got I'm not going to go over what I did in week 1, but I put the CrossFit overview into the handout. So I just want to end with the world-class fitness in 100 words, and so it doesn't need to be CrossFit, but this is wisdom that is empirically supportable. Eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. Keep intake to levels that will support exercise, but not body fat. Practice and train major lifts. Deadlift, I always say deadlift so you can pick up your groceries when you're 80. Clean, squat so you can squat on the toilet when you're 80. Clean and jerk. Snatch, push press is the other one, and that's so you can put things up on a high shelf when you're 80. Similarly, master the basics of gymnastics: pull-ups, dips, rope climbs, push-ups, sit-ups, presses to handstands, pirouettes, flips, splits, and holds, bike, run, swim, row, etc., hard and fast. 5 or 6 days per week, mix these elements in as many combinations and patterns as creativity will allow. Routine is the enemy. Keep workouts short and intense. Regularly learn and play new sports. So that is from, again, the CrossFit Level 1 Training Guide, page 17. And you can look to see the different models of fitness. that are sort of the foundations of this way, and the definition of fitness that is measurable, um, and then also the continuum of measures from sickness to wellness, health to fitness. And then there's some of the figures that sort of spell that out in a graphic kind of way before you get to the very last paragraph. Nutrition at the bottom, metabolic conditioning are the two biggest parts, but then gymnastics, weightlifting, and sport at the top. So it might be interesting to explore some of those and do your own. Okay, how would this mesh with what I'm learning theologically? How would I articulate this theologically? What scriptures come to mind when I engage this for the work of ministry? So I invite you into some of that play yourself, and I hope you do get to see a little bit of Greg Glassman stuff. There are interesting things about him. There are a lot of ways where he is no longer quite as directly involved as he was. CrossFit has become a little bit more of an organization, corporation, as it's grown, and again, it's not only about the CrossFit Games. If you want to see some of the breadth and diversity of the community, you can do a little bit of looking about that online. There's one woman in particular who I follow avidly. Athena Perez is her name. Scaled Nation is the organization that she began, which is really about looking at CrossFit workouts and being able to scale them for your body. But she is very much an advocate for CrossFit for larger bodies. She came in, I forget, 400 pounds, 500 pounds. I mean, she was in a bad way, and so she's now a CrossFit trainer and very much on her own fitness journey, working with coaches that are continuing to push her, and she's continuing to lose weight. She's continuing to live into a fitness lifestyle, even though she had been morbidly obese at the very beginning. So she's a powerful voice that I think gives a little bit more breadth and depth to some of how fitness as a community endeavor can be perceived. So blessings on further investigations, and as you may find your way into fitness as a communal endeavor for yourself. Highly, highly recommended. Peace be with you.